You're listening to episode 75, Gaining Control of Your Life After Being Mistreated, with Nick Barwick. Welcome to the Grass Gets Greener podcast, the show for survivors by survivors. I'm your host, Melissa Wilson, a bullying survivor and anti-bullying advocate. And each week you'll hear from a survivor who has overcome a traumatic experience to go on to not only survive, but thrive, so that you can too, starting now. Hey there, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I appreciate it, as always. And this is episode 75, which is pretty cool. That's 3/4 of the way to 100. And I have a really good and inspiring episode for you today. Before we get into that, though, I just want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by audible.com. Audible is the premier provider of digital audiobooks. I signed up with them to get you a free audiobook download along with a 30-day free trial. They have over 180,000 titles, including some that have been mentioned on this show in the past, that you can choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or whatever you use as an MP3 player. So if this is something that interests you and you haven't checked it out yet, all you have to do is go to thegrassgetsgreener.com/audible, and you'll be able to go ahead and get your free audio download along with that 30-day free trial. So today I'm going to be joined by survivor Nick Barwick. Nick's dad left him when he was 9, and then he was emotionally, physically, and sexually abused by a relative for around 3 years, and then he was placed into foster care. And he's going to tell us about each of those things, and then he's going to tell us about how he's been able to become a motivational speaker, a life performance coach, and a mentor for young people in the foster system today. And he's only just 23 years old. But the thing is that this is not about age. This is about healing and inspiring others and not letting your past define your future. Now, Nick did have to grow up quickly when his dad left when he was only 9 years old, and he was thrown into the role of man of the house. And he's going to tell us what that was like. And then he's going to share his experience of being in the foster care system and what that was like for him. And then we're going to talk about when he started to get control of his life and how he didn't want to be just another statistic of the foster care system. And he's going to talk about how he spoke in front of 2,000 people when he was just 17 years old and what that did for him. And that's when things start to get really inspiring here. And he's going to talk about how to change your life even if you don't think that you can. And we talk about shifting your perspective and proving your worth to yourself, and how he uses his past to motivate him. And just like Mike Gonsalves from a couple episodes back, Nick was also told that he wasn't going to amount to much and be able to achieve certain things in his life. But he's certainly been able to overcome that and to defy those expectations. So if you're looking for some inspiration and some motivation, then this episode is definitely for you. And I'm excited to share it with you. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Nick on. Nick, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining me here today to share your story with us.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, and I actually found out about you through Twitter.
All right.
And I wanted to have you on here because you have such an inspiring story, and I think you and I also share some commonalities in the message that we're trying to spread in the world. But what I love about your story the most and find so hopeful is that you've been able to overcome the many terrible childhood experiences that you've had, and you're only 23 years old. I mean, you've been able to take control of your life and start achieving things for yourself. And you're also giving back and helping others who are struggling and going through what you went through. So I'm grateful to have you on here today to share not only your story, but the journey that has led you to where you are now and to provide inspiration to the listeners. So Nick, what I like to do is just start at the beginning so that we know where you're coming from, and then we'll go from there. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Great. Kind of when I speak about my story, a lot of people think that because I grew up in foster care, and kind of before I went into foster care, life was great. Like life was really good. Like I really remember all of the like kind of happy moments of my childhood. And the thing is, for people that don't know what foster care is, you know, a lot of them assume that it's adoption, or a lot of them assume that, you know, our parents must have been addicted to drugs, or must have been involved in prostitution or in abuse or things like that. And that wasn't the case for me. My dad walked out on us when I was 9. He left us, and that was kind of when I had to grow up overnight. Literally, my dad was there one day, and when I woke up the next, he was gone. So I had to become the man of the house. And from my dad leaving, that led to my mum going through a deep, deep depression. She just spiraled out of control. Now, anyone that knows anything about depression, is a mental illness. You're not in control of what you say, what you do, or even what you don't do. And in my mum's case, it was what she didn't do. There were times where, you know, I would see her hitting her head against the wall, you know, cutting herself and things like that. And it was really hard because as a 9-year-old child, you know, you don't expect to see that stuff. You don't expect to see your mum doing that stuff. And that was really difficult. So, you know, but I was always there to patch her back up and make her feel better about herself and, you know, look after her. I also had 4 younger brothers, and they were all born with severe learning difficulties and other issues. So as well as parent my mother, I had to parent my brothers as well. And that was really difficult because as a 9-year-old child, what you want to be doing is, you know, being outside with your friends, you know, playing football, you know, being around your friend's house and things like that. But I couldn't do any of that because I had to look after my brothers and I had to look after my mum. And about 6 weeks after my dad had left us, we were introduced to a distant relative of our family. And I think it was my mum's 3rd cousin. And he came to live with us. And you know, my mum thought that this was great. It was kind of like an answer to her prayers, really, because she just wanted someone to put their arms around her and say, look, everything's going to be okay. I'm here to take care of you and I'm here to take care of your boys. And that's kind of what she got. And for myself also, it was kind of an answer to my prayers as well, because, you know, I'm the eldest of 5 boys. And, you know, anyone that knows anything about being the eldest sibling, it's not what it's cracked up to be. You know, I got into trouble for absolutely everything. Even when I did something good, I got into trouble for that. Like I can recall an experience where I left our family home to go and pick up some bread and milk for my mum. And when I returned, I got into trouble for doing that. Like my mum went crazy at me for leaving without telling her. And, you know, I said to her, look, I've just done this because I thought that's what you needed. You know, but so I got into trouble for doing something good. And then, so what I started to do was resort to doing things bad because I knew I was going to get into trouble for that. So I thought, you know, what's the point in being good? Because I'm going to get into trouble for being good. So I may as well just be bad. But when my mum's relative came to live with us, you know, I thought that this kind of could be my fresh start. You know, I could just be a kid again. And for the first kind of 6 months or so, that was what it was all about. You know, I was able to be a kid again. I had someone to look up to because, you know, when my dad walked out, I thought, you know, I can no longer look up to this person because he's just gone. So I could now look up to this person. And for the first 6 months, it was all fantastic. But as life went on, he started to change. He started to become this person that, you know, I just didn't know who he was. The long story short is that me and my brothers, we were all abused physically, sexually, and emotionally by this relative. And it all started first by grooming. I was groomed for the first few weeks. And then I was introduced to pornography. And then that led to touching and then that led to sexual activity between myself and between this relative. And, you know, it was a very surreal kind of part of my life. Like I can still remember it so vividly because I think when you go through something like that at the age of 9 or younger or older, it doesn't really matter. But when you go through a traumatic experience like that, it changes you. It completely changes your mentality towards life, your perspective on life. And I no longer felt like I was a child. I no longer felt that, you know, I was worth anything. And the reason for that is because he was in my head all the time. You know, I felt like I belonged to him. and I didn't belong to anyone else, and I couldn't be my own person. So I felt like, this guy just had a control of me, every part of my life. And this abuse lasted for around 3 years. Before I was at school one day, and I was talking to a staff member, and she asked me, how I was just in myself, and I just came out with it. 3 years of emotion just came pouring out, and I immediately tried to retract what I'd said to her, because I was told on a daily basis that if anyone ever found out what was happening to us, then my abuser would kill me and my family. And I knew that he was serious about that, because he took a blunt bit of glass and he sliced it across my wrist, and I've got two tiny, tiny little scars. But at the time, they seemed so huge in my life. I got two tiny, tiny little scars that I always look back on just to remind myself how far I've come. But I immediately tried to retract what I'd said, because I was scared for my life. But by the time I had got home, social services were around to my home, and three of my younger brothers were removed. And then eventually, around 6 months later, myself and my younger brother were taken into foster care as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Nick.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, went through a lot, and you talked about how you felt like you weren't a child anymore.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, well, two times actually. Once when your dad left, and you felt like you were the one who had to take care of everyone now, because you were, the oldest of your siblings.
Yeah.
And then also when you started to be abused.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, did you know why your dad had left you? Like, what was that like when you said that, like, happened overnight? So
Yeah.
what was that like when you woke up the next day and he was gone?
I mean, like, people often ask me this, and it's strange, because looking back on it now, I can see that there were many things that were leading up to that moment in time. There was constant arguments, constant fights between my mum and dad. But at the time when it happened, it was complete shock. I didn't think my dad, would be there one day and the next he wasn't. I mean, my dad wasn't there a lot of the time because he worked a lot of night shifts, because he was a coach driver. So I was used to him not being around, but like, he was always there in the mornings. So when I woke up and he wasn't in bed, I was thinking, what's gone on? Like, what is going on? And I went to speak to my mum, and she said, your dad's left. He's gone. He's not coming back. And it was also crazy. I mean, I just felt numb. I really felt numb. And I was like, I just broke down. I was crying, and, I just wanted my dad back. And it didn't happen. Fortunately for myself, though, and for my brothers, my dad wasn't like many other dads that walk out on their children. He wasn't gone for good. He didn't come back to the family home, but we didn't lose contact with him. I mean, a month or so after he had gone, we got back into contact, and we would start to see him every now and then. So we could still maintain a relationship. But at the time, it was all so crazy. It was all so crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then, so you ended up going into foster care.
Yes.
Eventually, after you had told about being abused.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? Was it
Oh man,
was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Or it's hard to say?
I mean, like, with the way that I've turned out, many people say that it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. But I mean, I never say that. I never say that it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I don't know what would have happened if I didn't go into foster care. Would I be where I am today if I hadn't gone into foster care? I don't know, because I could have still turned out the same way. It would have been highly unlikely, but no one can say that I wouldn't have turned out that way. But foster care for me was it was much like a roller coaster. That there were times where it was great and it was really fun, and I was having a good time, and then there were times where I just wanted to get out. There was times when I just wanted to get off of that roller coaster, because I was getting too scared, or it wasn't going the way that I wanted it to go. Because there the thing is, when you're in foster care, you feel completely different to your peers and everyone else around you. Because especially at school time, when you finish school, you've got all your friends going home on the bus, or going home with their parents, and you're going home with these strangers. Because after the first day, and you go to school with these strange people, they're strangers, and trying to explain to your friends like who these people are, it's really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And foster care, it's quite hard to explain, because you're literally being brought up by people that have nothing to do with you, people that are being paid to bring you up. However, you do have people there that are willing to take you into their home and hope, and are motivated to hopefully make a difference in your life. And I definitely felt that from my carers. Is they wanted to make a difference in my life, and they had so much determination and a lot of commitment to me. And I'm quite fortunate in the sense of I only ever had one foster placement, which is actually, especially in the UK, is actually very unusual. On average, young people are moved to about 4 or 5 foster placements throughout their time in foster care. So I was with one set of carers for 9 years. So that's why people think that it must have been successful for me, because of the length of time that I was in foster care, and the fact that I stayed with only one set of foster carers for my entire duration in care.
Mm.
But
Did you have like a good relationship with your foster family?
it was on and off, really, because there were times when they were really, really kind of horrible to me. There were times where, like, I truly believe that whilst I was in their care, I was emotionally abused by them also. Because there were times where they were using my emotions against me. There were times when I got to 17, I wanted to get back in contact with my birth family, because the contact between us has been stopped for 5 years. I wanted to get back into contact with them, and my carers would always say to me, oh, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to get back in contact with people that have caused you so much harm in the past, or haven't taken care of you, or took your childhood away from you? And thinking back on it, they were so wrong to ever say that to me, because it doesn't matter whether your parents are abusers, whether they're addicted to drugs, or they're prostitutes, or they've not treated you very nicely. At the end of the day, they're your biological family. They are your parents. They're your siblings. They're your family. You don't lose that love for them.
Mm.
I never lost that love for them. So regardless of what I experienced when I was a child, I didn't ever lose that love for my family. So for my carers to constantly say things like that to me was absolutely and fundamentally wrong. There were also times where, they threatened me as well. They threatened to hit me. And a lot of the time that was just their natural response to me, because I was a very manipulative, aggressive, chaotic young person. I really was. So kind of their response my female carer's response to me quite often was, oh, I will slap you if you do things like that. And that was quite possibly the worst thing that she could say to me, because for 3 years of my life, I was brought up in a very chaotic environment where violence was the drug of choice, man. Like, violence was what I wanted. So kind of when my carers would threaten me with violence, I thought, fantastic. Let's get in a confrontation. Let's do something, So when they would
Mm.
do that, I'd get really irate. I'd get really angry. And to show them that I was angry, what I did was I would constantly pull cupboard doors off of their hinges. Just to show them how angry I was getting, so I could. And I'm quite a big person. I'm 6'5", and when I first went into foster care, I was around 6 foot. I was around 6 foot tall, and I was around 15 stone. And so I could very much use my size to intimidate my foster carers, because they weren't the biggest of people. So kind of foster care. When you go into care, you expect that it's gonna change you. it's not going to be chaotic, and you're not going to be in the same environment that you were in the past. But I felt like there were parts of my past that, such as violence and things like that, that was brought with me into foster care and were still happening. Was still happening when they shouldn't have been happening.
Hmm.
So
Did you have a yeah, did you have a relationship with your siblings during this time, or were
um,
you guys separated?
we were all separated to different parts of the country. So all five of us were separated. We didn't have contact. No.
That must have made it even more
Oh,
difficult.
so difficult, especially when for 3 years of my life, really, I was bringing my brothers up. Uh,
Right.
my carers got really angry because I kept telling them, to call to phone my brother's other foster carers, and that they couldn't understand that. They couldn't understand why I kept worrying about my brothers, and every time I had to explain to them, they're my brothers. I love them. I want to know that they're safe. My carers would turn around and say to me, of course they're going to be safe. They're with foster carers now. Of course they're going to be safe. That wasn't good enough for me because they were just words, and
Right.
words didn't mean jack to me. Words
Mm.
didn't mean absolutely anything to me. It was people's actions that meant a lot to me, because I'd seen good actions from people, and I saw really negative actions towards people from people. And the reason why I was so cautious around my carers and around my brother's carers and wanting to know how, if my brothers were safe, was because we were now living with strangers. And the last time we were living with strangers, we were abused for 3 years,
Hmm.
and no professionals, social workers, therapists, foster carers, anyone could understand that mentality. They could not understand why I was being the way that I was. And it was because, my past experiences had suggested that strangers would abuse you, or they would hurt you, or they would cause you some sort of pain in your life. Um,
Right.
so, I felt like I had a constant battle with my carers, and I think that my carers had a constant battle with me, because I just wouldn't let my guard down. I wouldn't let them into my life. I wouldn't. I wouldn't accept their love. I wouldn't accept anything. But because I felt unworthy of receiving love, because you know, and the reason for that was because I didn't love myself because of the things that had happened to me. Because, like I said before, when you're abused, you change as a person. Um, when
Hmm.
you experience any sort of abuse, you change as a person. And so my feelings towards myself had changed, because I was like, how could I let another guy do this to me? So then I started to question my sexuality, and I started to think, if I let this guy do these things to me, does that make me gay? Knowing full well that I wasn't gay, I wasn't attracted to another male or anything like that. But because of these things that had happened to me, I thought, oh, I must be gay. So
Hmm.
I started to hate myself, because I was raised to be homophobic. I was raised to be racist. So I had a lot of negativity in my life, which meant that I had a lot of negativity towards myself. So, my carers were never going to win the battle, really.
Yeah. Yes, it makes a lot of sense that you would be experiencing all of those things, and that that's how you would be affected by what you had gone through, not only um, at home when you were younger, but then as a result of going through the foster care system as well.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like maybe being in the foster care system made it more difficult for you to heal, or at least didn't allow you to start healing
Yeah.
until perhaps you got out of it.
I mean, I think you're partly right. I mean, in the sense of, um, I think the reason why I couldn't, in a way, heal in a short space of time was because there were so many people involved in my life that I felt like I couldn't breathe. Because when you go into foster care, you have your carers there. So in my case, I had two carers. I had a guardian at the time as well, a court appointed guardian, because there was a court case. I had a solicitor. Um, I had my social worker, I had my foster care as social worker, I had a therapist, I had a support worker. So as you can see, there's many, many people involved in my life that I
Hmm.
didn't want involved in my life. And I felt all the time that I would speak to somebody, every time I would speak to a professional, I felt like they were trying to diagnose me with something. So I never felt that I could have an actual conversation with anyone because I felt like someone was judging me or they were trying to diagnose me with something. So I think what would have made it easier for me is if, do you know what? They just let me be who I wanted to be and just let me live with my foster carers in the best way that I could without trying to get involved every time I did something bad or I did something stupid. Because when I do something good, no one really wanted to know. But every time you did something bad, whew, man, they would all swarm in like a bunch of bees. They would just be around me. Oh, Nick's done this. What's the reason for this? Let's talk to him. Let's have a 2 hour conversation about the problem and things like that.
Now, you said you were in foster care for 9 years.
Yes.
Yeah, so you were like about what, 18 or so when you get out of it?
No, actually, I left when I had just turned 22 because in the UK we have this thing called the stay and put policy, which allows young people in foster care to stay in care until the age of 21 if they're in full-time education or training. And the reason that I was given that opportunity was because I went off to university, so I was still able to stay with my foster parents whilst I was at university. So when I turned 22, I then moved out of my foster placement.
Okay, I see. What was that like for you when you got to finally move out?
Oh man, well, it all ended in such a negative way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's just been like negative after negative, really. But what it was is that when I graduated from university, I went back to live for around 3 months with my foster carers until I could find my own place. But during that time, I started to work for the fostering agency that my carers were actually foster carers for. So I started to pick up on certain things they were doing that they shouldn't have been doing. And I was picking up on the things that they weren't doing that they should have been doing. And I started to pull them up on that. I started to say, you really shouldn't be doing this or you really should be doing that. And I feel like they started to feel a little threatened by that. And at the time when I was working for the agency, I was informed that the money that social services was paying to my foster carers was being stopped. And by the time I got home from work that day, my foster carers had packed up all of my stuff and asked me to leave. And that was crazy. Like I really wasn't expecting that. Luckily, girlfriend at the time, we had just got a place together. So, I was able to move in a few days before, but I was really, really not expecting that. So it was all a blur, really. It was all kind of like, oh, Nick, you need to go. Okay, then I'll go. So I just packed up all of my stuff and left. Yeah.
So you didn't even have control over that
No,
situation?
no. So, and that's the thing. Like when you're in foster care, you feel like you have no control. And then, suddenly when I feel like I've got a bit of control in my life, I have none because it's all removed from me again. And yeah, that was quite difficult. But, I survived it, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that, And I'm curious to know because, like, as I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, you're only 23 now, but I know that you've really been able to turn things around and just get to such a better place today. When did that start happening for you? When do you feel like you started to get some control over things in your life?
Well, I think one of the big turning points in my life was when I went through depression when I was 16. I started to feel and look like my mum did when she was going through her depression. And this was as a result of, I found out that my mum had another baby and it was my little sister. And I've then found out that my little sister was later adopted, and that I'd never be able to see her until she decided when she was 18 that she wanted to find us. So that led me going down a really dark path. Led to me just spiraling out of control, and I just hated everything about myself. But then I remember literally looking in the mirror one day and saying, what have I become? Like, do I want to be just like the statistics that social services say that I'm going to be? And those statistics is that, 30% of all homeless people that are in the UK are from the foster system. There's 85,000 people in our criminal justice system. 43% of those were in the foster system. And I didn't want to be one of those statistics, one of those statistics that say you're going to be in prison, you're going to be homeless, you're going to be on drugs, or you're going to be dead. They're the only statistics that seem to be out there. And I didn't want to be one of them. And I remember looking in the mirror one day saying, do you know what? You can do so much better than this, but you really need to prove your worth to yourself. And so kind of, I started to read books. I started to watch kind of motivational messages, and, I just started to kind of just plant that seed really every now and then. Even if it was only for 30 seconds, I'd watch something on YouTube or anything like that, just to kind of get a bit of motivation in myself, start to be inspired to, change my life really. And every now and then I'd wake up and I'd be like, yeah, today's going to be a good day. And then something would happen at school and it would drag me back down, or something would happen with my carers and it would drag me back down. But it wasn't until I was 17 where I met my girlfriend, who is now my wife, where, I really started to change as a person. Because I think when you find someone that can really make a difference in your life, that's when that difference is made. Because, she was literally all that I could ever think about. I need to get my act together to take care of her, to be everything that she wants me to be, So I found myself starting to do things for her. And every time I would say that, she would always say, no, you need to do these things for yourself. But I was like, no, I need to do these things for you, because if I can do these things for you, then actually I'd be doing those things for myself as well. So it was actually a really cool cycle that I was on, because I was helping her, but she was helping me. And then in turn, I was helping myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you found someone that kind of became your why for doing things. And then you, in doing things for her, in taking care of another person, that, helped you to take care of yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like at the start, it was just puppy love, it was kind of like two kids just having such a romantic view of the world and thinking, oh, we're going to get married, we're going to have 20,000 children, and we're going to, have a huge mansion and £1 million or whatever. So it was a very romantic view at the start. But I just found that she was my why, and she was the reason why I was doing everything that I was doing at that time. And she was the reason why I wanted to get myself out of that dark place. And I did it. But then when I got myself out of that dark place, I started to think, you know what? I can really make a difference in other people's lives. And that's kind of where I went on my own journey to say, I can definitely do this. And then when I was 17, I was given an opportunity to fly out to Canada. I flew out to British Columbia, and I shared my story in front of 2,000 people. And it was one of the best days of my life, just being there and no longer having the fear of being judged, no longer, wanting to just crawl into a hole and die. I no longer had any of those feelings. For the first time, when I was on stage and I got, a huge audience in front of me, and they were all clapping me right at the end, and, there were tears in people's eyes and things like that, I felt really proud of myself. And I realized, I am worth something. I can do something really special in this world, and I can help others do that too. So really, the biggest year of my life was when I was 17 years old.
That's great. It sounds like you had kind of that motivation and desire inside of you to want to do things differently, and to be, not just another one of these statistics that you were hearing about. But then, as you say, that, things would happen, and you would kind of get knocked down a little bit. But then it sounds like there were external factors that came into play, and that kind of helped pick you back up and keep you going.
Yes, definitely. Very much so, because I believe that I always had it inside of me. But it just took me a really long time to be able to find it and to pull it out of myself, because I believe that everyone has something to offer in this world, regardless of their circumstance. If you have a pure determination, a pure passion for something, and a pure desire to change your life, then it will happen, regardless of your circumstance.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of people they can't see that.
Yeah,
They I don't know, I guess they get hung up on how bad things are and they think that it's going to be that way forever, that it has to be that way forever.
definitely.
But yeah, it doesn't have to be. And certainly like in your case, you found a way to get out of that,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
you know.
like there's always going to be times in our lives, okay, where we feel like the world is against us. Or why me? Why is this terrible thing happening to me? But what we need to realize is that everybody has issues in their lives. Everybody goes through things that they wish they weren't going through, but not everyone gives up. The majority of people will find a way to overcome adversity, but there are some people that truly believe that they can't overcome adversity. And kind of one of my big messages is that you can do this, you know, but sometimes what you need to do is take baby steps, go back to basics and take every day as it comes. Don't set these big 1 year goals or 5 year, 10 year goals, okay? Set goals by the hour or by the day or by the week, and eventually that'll turn into a month or that'll turn into a year. But do something to keep yourself going. Do something that keeps keeps you proactive and keeps you moving forward. Because if you're by yourself, which is one of the hardest things to do when you're by yourself, you're lonely. These are feelings that we don't want to experience. These are feelings that we don't want to feel. So that it's a lot easier to be consumed by those feelings. But what you need to do is tell yourself that you are worth something, that yes, this may be my situation now, but this doesn't need to be my situation forever. And if you can tell yourself that, I can absolutely guarantee that the situation that you're in now, you will not be in the next year or the next 2 years or the next 3 years. Because once you can shift your mentality towards yourself and towards your situation, your whole perspective on life changes and something great will come.
Well said. Thank you for saying that. I absolutely agree. So, are there other things that have helped you to get to where you are today, Nick? Any specifics?
Yeah, I mean, like, just for me, it's like when I'm working with other foster children, and I see all of these things written about them, and I see kind of these predicted outcomes for them. Because, I mean, when I was 13, I was told that I was never going to be able to achieve academically, socially, financially, and have intimate, lasting relationships with people. And I'd never be able to work with children, young people, or vulnerable adults. So I had my outcomes predicted for me before I was even given an opportunity to prove myself. So one of the things that keeps me going now and makes me so determined and passionate about what I do is helping other young people prove themselves, but not prove themselves to other people. It's about proving themselves to themselves. Because if they can prove their worth to themselves, then that worth is going to shine through to other people. And, if I can lend a helping hand in doing that, then that's all I need. I get paid quite a bit of money to do what I do. But, money to me is just a tool. Money to me just gives me the opportunity to be able to do what I do on a consistent basis. I do a lot of the stuff that I do for free as well, because money can only get you so far. But if you're willing to work for free, then to me, that shows a lot about your integrity, about your character. Because, and being able to see a smile on a child's face, knowing that, you've made them feel good about themselves and you could have played a part in changing their life. That's all that matters to me. That might sound like a cliche thing for a person to say, but, of course I need to live and of course I need to make money, but I want to see kids happy, because the kids that we work with now, they're our future leaders of the world. They're our future teachers of the world. So let's give them the tools and the strategies that, I use to get to where I am today, to hopefully inspire them to get somewhere similar.
That's great. Now, I'm curious, did you have any positive role models growing up?
Yes, I did.
You did?
When I was 14, I got involved in boxing. and I've been doing that ever since. And and the most influential person in my life was actually my boxing coach, and he he taught me that a lot of people think that boxing's all about who can get the first big punch in to knock their opponent out and go on to become world heavyweight champion or whatever. And but what he said is, if you think about it a little differently, if you take 2 steps back, your opponent has to take 3 steps forward in order to get one good punch in. Okay, so I then took that motto that he had and adopted it and used it in my own life. And that was, sometimes when things get really tough, all you've got to do is take 2 steps back, breathe, and then take 3 steps forward after you have assessed the situation in order to overcome that situation. And, if I hadn't had that coach that I had in my life at that time, man, would I be where I am today? Possibly, probably, but I wouldn't have been given that, those words of wisdoms, and I wouldn't, have the attitude towards life that I have now.
Yeah, it sounds like there have been some key things that have happened to you.
Oh, definitely.
That have allowed you to get to where you are right now. Yeah. How are you doing today overall? I mean, are there things that you still struggle with?
No, I genuinely don't. Because for me, it's all about not letting your past define your future. I guess, that there's times where I still remember the things that happened to me, but I don't look at that as a bad thing. I don't look at that as a thing that I need help with, because I want to remember where I've come from. I want to remember all of the kind of the trauma that I went through, because I use that as kind of my driving force to drive me forward. There's still times when, I'll try to go to sleep and I'll see my abuser's face. But I don't look at that as necessarily as a bad thing. I look at that as kind of a shadow of my past, and that's somewhere where I don't want to go back to. So kind of, I can honestly say that at this present moment in time, I'm the happiest that I've ever been. I'm married. I've got a good business. I live in a great area. I've got a fantastic wife. I've achieved everything that, people said when I was 13 that I was never going to be able to do. In September, I start my master's in counseling and psychotherapy. So I'm doing things that I'm going beyond expectation of myself, but of other people as well. So I genuinely cannot complain about any aspect of my life. So yeah, things are great.
That's great. It sounds like you're definitely in control of your life now.
Oh, absolutely. I'm never going to let anyone else be in control of my life. The thing that I love to do is I love to work in partnership with people, because I look at my life now as a partnership with my wife. If there's times where I'm getting too big for my boots or my ego is getting a bit bigger than what it should be, then she'll bring me back down to earth. And she'll remind me of kind of, how I've got to where I am today. And, that's a big thing. So I like to think that, my life is all about a partnership, and, that partner that I have is my wife. And I think that's a great way to look at my life, really, is as a partnership with her.
Yeah, that's great. Now, one of the things we've talked about here a few times is proving your worth, and needing to prove that to yourself. And I know you have this thing called the prove your worth philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Yeah. So what I do is I've run a seminar and a workshop for young people, but also care providers, so care service providers. And that workshop is literally just designed around my philosophy of, as I mentioned earlier on, was it's about proving your worth, but not proving your worth to other people. It's about proving your worth to yourself, because that, like I said, when I was going through depression, I just didn't know what my worth was. I didn't know what my purpose here on earth was. I had no self-belief. I had no self-confidence. My self-esteem was very, very low. So what my philosophy does is, and my workshop does is, it teaches my young people how to be confident, how to raise their self-esteem, how to find their self-worth and find their purpose. Because once they can find all of that stuff, all of the other things no longer become relevant. Of course, the things that they've been through in their childhoods, are relevant, because, that plays a big part in kind of where they are today. But once they can find that self-esteem, that self-confidence, and their worth and their purpose, their life will take off. So what I aim to do is kind of give them the tools and strategies that I used in order to get to where I am today, to hopefully make a small imprint on their lives and say, do you know what? If you think this is going to work for you, steal it. Absolutely steal it and make it better. Apply it to your life and make it better and make it suitable for you as an individual. And so far it's doing fantastic. I've had no complaints. I've had, young people writing to me, and, I've had social workers writing to me saying, there's been a change in the young people that we care for. And that's just amazing for me to hear, because I only kind of, I started to think about this. I started to think that way, when I was 17, but I only really put this into practice, around 7 months ago.
That's great. Tell us a little more about what it is that you do today and what you have going on.
Okay, so I'm kind of, I like to get involved in a variety of things. So officially, my business is called Nick Barwick, ICPS, which stands for Inspirational Coaching and Public Speaking. So I am a professional motivational speaker and life performance coach. So I have a variety of clients that I help, that I work with. I've had one client that came to me because he was having trouble in a relationship with a girl, and I help him overcome that, and he's doing really, really well now. I've had a client come to me because he wants to set up his own business, and I also mentor young people as well in the fostering system. So I've got a variety of experience in kind of different areas of life, really. So that's kind of my coaching and mentoring. And then kind of I do a variety of speaking. So I speak at fostering conferences. I also speak at general conferences as well. They don't have to be in the social care sector or anything like that. I've spoken at conferences that are just looked at as a normal working job, where I need to raise morale for staff. Because I think regardless of whether you've grown up in the foster care system or you've grown up in a normal environment, there's going to be times where you're feeling low. There's going to be times where you're feeling down, and there's going to be times where you want to feel inspired and motivated. And I think that's what I'm good at doing. I'm able to share my story, but I'm also able to then, make that relevant to the audience's, current situation, when they feel like they're not going anywhere, or they've lost direction and they want to get back on the path and find a clear vision. That's what I aim to do. So I am a professional speaker. I speak at between 10 and 12 events a month, and then I coach people and I mentor young people, and I sit on different panels as well, to approve foster carers and social workers. So I kind of do a lot of stuff, really, but I mainly do professional speaking.
Yeah, sounds like you have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And you're really trying to help others.
Yeah.
Which is great. Do people ever, ask you like how did you get to this point in your life so quickly?
Yeah, they do, especially because I do this conference every month called Journey to Foster, and that's for potential foster carers who are inquiring into fostering, and every single time, I tell you what, if I genuinely was given £1 for every time that carers asked me this, I would genuinely be a billionaire right now. They always ask it, and I'm just like, just because I'm 23, that's irrelevant, because a person that is, I don't know, maybe 65 may not be at a point in their life that I'm at right now. So I think that age doesn't actually matter, and I think that yes, I may have found my purpose and found my worth in a really short space of time. But to be honest, I think I was just destined for that. I think that, because I truly believe that, I'm here by the grace of God and things like that. And, I believe that this was my plan all along. And I believe that, this was the way that my life needed to turn out. And I feel really, really blessed. But when I start kind of saying that to the carers, they look at me like, what are you talking about, you crazy little boy? And but no, like I truly believe that I always had the potential to be able to get to this point in my life. And yes, it's happened in quite a short space of time, but you know, that's just the way it had to be. I mean, there was no medical, there was no like miracle cure for me. You know, I didn't have crazy amounts of kind of support and things like that. You know, I had 2 years of therapy when I was 14. That kind of was just a waste of time. So you know, I had kind of, you know, I tried all these different things, but literally the thing that kind of got me to where I am today is the change in my mindset, you know, the change in my mentality and the way that I thought and felt about myself and everyone else around me. Because as soon as I felt and decided that I was worth being loved, I was able to feel loved, and then I was able to love myself. So, you know, that's kind of the main thing for me, is how I changed about, you know, how I changed the way I felt about myself. That's literally the answer that I have to give.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing the power that changing your mindset can have,
Yeah.
and what that can kind of set in motion for you. But yeah, I mean, you know, and the reason that I kind of, you know, mentioning your age and everything as
Yeah.
well is just because it's just not something you see very often.
No, it's so true. I mean, like if I compare myself to my brothers, like my brother, he's 22 and he's nowhere near kind of where I am in my life. You know, but I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that as a, you know, he's still on his journey, you know, whether that takes him another year or 2 years or 10 years, I'm going to still be there to support him and say, look, just give yourself time. I think, you know, a lot of people put expectations on people to say, do you know what, you're 22 years old now. You really should have snapped out of the bad behaviors that you've been doing since you were 12. You know, kind of those expectations can be can have such a damaging effect on people. Especially kind of, you know, when people say at the age of 18, okay, at the age of 18, you should be ready to leave home or you should be ready to leave foster care. Yes, the age says that, but cognitively, they may be nowhere near ready to be able to do that. You know, their brain development, their mentality may not have developed to a stage where they're an adult. Because in my brother's case, is he's about 4 years delayed. So really, he's actually only just coming up to 17, you know? So he's still in his head a kid. So why should we put all these expectations that people can just change with a click of the fingers? It just boggles my mind sometimes.
Yeah, so I guess the point there is that, you know, age doesn't matter. Who cares how old you are when you know, get to that better place? And, you know, maybe some people can do it sooner, some will take more time, but
Absolutely. Just
it's going to take as much time as it's going to
no,
take.
absolutely. Like, do you know what? Sometimes I say to my clients, do you know what? Just give yourself a break, man. Give yourself a break. Go and chill out, and time will heal you. You know, with time, things will get better. Don't rush to have all of these things implemented into your life right now, because that can be the worst thing that you can do. It's about taking in little bits at a time, making little subtle changes to your life that will have a big impact on you positively well into the future. Because once you try to overload yourself with all of these things straight away, your brain can't handle it. Your body can't handle it. So suddenly, boom, you get ill, you get stressed, you know, you go through depression because you're not ready to handle all of that stuff. Whereas if you're taking in things bit by bit, dose by dose, it'll work out, you know? I think people have just lost the value of time. People have lost kind of patience, you know, because we are kind of, because when I was I did my A levels. Do you know what A levels are?
No,
No.
sorry.
So kind of their A levels are kind of what we do if we choose to go on to kind of sixth form, which is kind of around the age of 15 to 17. Um, and I did philosophy and I did.
It's like a test of some sort.
Yeah. So it's like a 2 year. It's like it's like another stage of high school. really. And I did my A levels in philosophy and ethics, and I can still remember it really, really clearly. From a utilitarian point of view, Jeremy Bentham, he would say that, you know, humans are pain avoiding, pleasure seeking organisms. Okay. So if we refer our lives back to that, we would say that we want all of these things right now that make us feel so good about ourselves, make our lives so fantastic. Okay. We want all of these things right now. And what we want to do is avoid all pain at all costs, whether that's emotional, physical, or whatever. We want to avoid all of that pain at all costs. But what we actually do when we take in all of those pleasurable things straight away, I believe that we cause ourselves so much more pain. That pain just comes to us because when you take in all of those pleasurable things, you can't take in any more. Does that make sense? So then with that, more pain comes. In my head, it makes perfect sense, but I know when I'm speaking it, it sounds like total rubbish.
Um, you have to work through the pain.
Yeah, absolutely. But do it step by step, you know,
Mhm.
dose by dose. Just take tiny little steps in order to be ready to take in all of that pleasure, to take in all of those good things that are, going to make your life better. But just don't expect it to all happen straight away. Don't try to get that immediate gratification and be like, "Do you know what? I want all of this stuff right now. I want everybody to be so kind to me. I want, everyone to have perfect manners, and, I want £1 million and all of this stuff." Don't expect all of that to happen straight away, because if it does happen and then, you can't take in anymore, then, that euphoria that you once felt is suddenly gone. And then you want it back, but you can't get it back. So once you can't get it back, then you start to experience that, oh, life doesn't seem so good anymore. So, you start to slip into that, that dark little shadow that's hovering over you, because, you can't find that, find that relief anymore.
It's kind of like you can have all the material things in the world, but they're not necessarily going to make you happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no one should feel bad if they're, older than you and they're still struggling. And
Definitely not.
what I think is great about your story, Nick, is that you got into that place, and great. So you happen to be 23, but now you're trying to help others get there as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
You know,
my mum often says to me, I'm a 97-year-old man in a 23-year-old man's body. So, I truly believe age is just a number. So, if you're 33, 43, 53, and you're still not in a place where you can say, "Do you know what, I 100% love myself," or you're in a place where I can say, "I'm 100% happy with myself," give it time, man. Give it another 10 years, give it another year or whatever. But don't give up. Don't say that, this is just me and I'm just going to settle for this, because I don't see that I'm going to get anything else good in my life. Don't do that, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after or the day after that.
Mhm.
Something completely unexpected could happen that could actually change your life in a really positive way.
Absolutely. That's why I get up every morning.
Absolutely.
So you have a relationship with your brothers again?
Yes, I have a relationship with my brothers and my mum and my dad also.
It's great. It's great. How's the relationship with your parents?
Oh yeah, man, like it's fantastic. I think for me, I've been really, really blessed and lucky in the sense of, my love for my parents and my brothers, it never left me. It was always there. It was just put on hold for, 5 years of my life. And we had to build those bridges again, and it was bumpy, and we had to overcome a lot together. But once we did that, it was like we were never apart. It was like we were never split up. Um, you know, Life is great. Like the relationship that I've got with my family is, I can't complain. And I know that it's getting to that stage where it's normal, because they really annoy me. I really annoy them. But it's perfect, because that's what a normal looking family is just like. You know, that's why I'm loving life.
That's great. And that's great that you were able to get those relationships back.
Yeah.
Did you have like healing that you had to do with your dad over him leaving?
Uh, Not so much. I mean, because like I looked at it like, how would I have reacted if I was put in the situation that he was in? So I had to kind of, you know, walk in his shoes. And I think that, would I have reacted in the same way? No, probably not. But that's because my dad and myself, we're different people, but we're also the same, if that makes sense. My dad is very good at getting things done and looking after people, but what he's not so good at is like when the going gets tough, you know, he doesn't know how to cope with that. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah.
As I am very resilient, I'm very good at kind of digging my heels in and saying, I'm not going to give up.
I mean, that's great. I'm happy for you and for where you're at today. And so I want to ask you the final question that I have for you.
Yeah.
And that is, given what you know now,
Yeah.
if you could go back to when you were going through your tough times and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just hold on, man. I actually wrote this. I wrote this letter to my. I titled it "My 13-year-old self," um, and it was one of kind of the most therapeutic, wonderful things that I ever did. And in that letter, I was just saying, look, dear Nick, things will get better over time. Just, hold on. Life will get better. You'll meet a wonderful woman. You'll still have your family and things like that. So kind of if I was to look back on my life and, be able to give myself one piece of advice, it would just be like, stay strong, hold on, and just give yourself time. That's really what it was all about.
Hold on.
Yeah,
Yep.
hold on. I feel like bursting into song right now. Just hold on, man. Like that's what it's all about. Like one of the really influential figures in my life was Eminem.
Uh-huh.
Eminem was like, oh man, like I could relate to his music so much because of like his personal story as well. I could relate so much to that. And through listening to his lyrics, that gave me the ability to be able to hold on and say, do you know what? Eminem had a really rubbish life when he was younger. And yes, he did some bad things in his adulthood, but look at him now. Look at the inspirational figure he is now. And I like to think that he played a really big part in my life. So kind of the piece of advice I give to myself would literally be just to just hold on, know that things will get better. And, these things were meant to happen to you in order to put you in a position where you can make a massive, huge difference to other people's lives.
Yeah. I'm not really into rap music, but a couple of his songs have definitely inspired me
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
um, yeah, and music in general
Yeah,
too. I mean, it was big for me. Um, but yeah, that's great. And I think about writing the letter too. I think that's something that people could do right now for themselves. Like if they're not in a good place right now, like I think they could write a letter to themselves right now,
oh, absolutely.
and
I think, yeah,
for how things are going to be for them in the future.
definitely. I think you're 100% right. I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. If you are struggling with any aspect of your life or, whatever, just write a letter to yourself, you know, just write a letter to yourself, regardless of
Yeah.
whatever time period it is, just write a letter to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I think that'd be a great thing for people to do. Nick, before I let you go, how can people get in touch with you and find out about
Yeah.
what you have going on?
So, firstly, I've got a website that people can go on, and that is www.nickbarwick.co.uk. It's very straightforward. Or I've got a YouTube channel, where people can watch my videos and then also just leave me some comments, and I always respond to them. And that is Nick Vlogs Stuff. I also have a Twitter, which is also twitter.com/Nick Vlog Stuff. And then I also have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Nick PYW Barwick.
All right, great. I will have that all linked up on your show notes page. And I definitely recommend people go check out some of your YouTube videos. I was checking some of them out to get ready for this call, and especially some of the ones you've done recently, like you've really been focusing on kind of personal development
Yeah.
stuff and inspiration. So I think people should definitely go check that out. And yeah, I want to thank you for coming on here today
No
and
problem.
for sharing your story and the journey that has gotten you to where you are today. And really, I think you're just such an inspiration, and for what you've been able to accomplish and the mentality that you have today. And I think that we can all, take something away from that. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
no problem. It's thanks for reaching out to me and asking me to be part of this. I mean, it's been a great experience for me. Like I said, it's like the first podcast I've ever done. So I hope there's been some value to the listeners and to yourself also. And let's just love life, man. Let's just love life.
I love it. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think there definitely has been inspiration here for people as well. So thank you, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, and you.
Thanks for listening to the show today. This has been the Grass Gets Greener podcast, episode 75. Go to thegrassgetsgreener.com/Nick Barwick to find the links mentioned during this episode or to leave a comment. So I hope that you were inspired by Nick's story, but also that you don't feel bad if you're not where you want to be yet and you're older than Nick is. Like I said in the beginning, and like Nick talked about as well, this is not about age. This is about the healing journey. And Nick's here to share what that journey has looked like for him and to inspire you for yours, but it's certainly not to make you feel bad in any way. And I said in the previous episode that I'm going to have a few episodes coming up here with people who are younger, who are in their early 20s and are doing well today, because I think that's really cool. That's a great thing, but, we're all going to be on our own timetables, and that's perfectly fine. I think the important thing is to continue to make progress and continue to do the work. Listening to this episode, I'm reminded that it's really about the journey and not about a destination, a destination called healed. It's about a journey called healing. And I think it's about finding ways to travel well on that journey. And that's what I hope that this episode has helped you with. If you like this one, then be sure to come back next week as I talk to Bethany Ellen. Bethany is actually the first of a few other people that I'm going to have on the show who's also from A Voice for the Innocent, like Jamie Sivers of last week. And she's going to talk with us about overcoming sexual abuse and being in a controlling relationship, to going on to making new memories and getting around the right people. So be sure to come back to check that one out. And just as a reminder, if you want to check out that deal from audible.com, that's at thegrassgetsgreener.com/audible. And of course, don't forget to head over to iTunes or Stitcher to leave the show a rating and review so that we can reach as many survivors as possible. And as always, have hope.